Welcome, everyone, to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time. This is our 11th lesson and the second to last lesson, probably, of Masechet Yoma. We will be completing our study of Masechet Yoma next Thursday. So I have to see if I can do 8 daf on Tuesday. We'll see. Otherwise, we'll save it for the week after. But those of you who are learning every day, this Masechet finishes next Thursday. So maybe we will try to finish it up next Tuesday as well. So we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end. This week we're going to be summarizing Daf 71, Ayin Aleph, through 79, Ayin Tet. So we are going to finish up the seventh chapter, and the Daf 71 talks about the end of the service and tells us that the verse that tells us that Aharon, that Aaron came out of the Kodesh HaKodashim to remove the different items, that this verse is out of order in the service. I brought a picture for you. This is again from Daf HaChaim. It is in Hebrew, but it does show a summary. For those of you who don't read Hebrew, you can see how the clothing is different for the high priest. Again, and we're going to talk about his clothing in a little bit. So if you look at picture number 1, the high priest is wearing his regular high priest clothing, the Bigdei Kehuna, which we call Bigdei Zahav, the golden vestments. And picture number 2 is showing you the Bigdei Lavan, the white clothing in anything that was done special for Yom Kippur. So we have learned all of these services. And this picture is showing us how, again, remember we said that there were 5 times that the high priest went into the mikvah, and 10 times that he washed his hands and his feet, and that was every time he switched clothing. So here you can see, right, clothing number 1 is his regular garments when he does the tamid, the regular service of the day. Number 2 is, or again, in between number 2 is the white clothing where he's going to be doing the avodah, the service that is done inside the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodashim. Number 3 is when he changes again into the gold clothing when he does the ayil, the ram, his own and for the nation. Number 4 is when he puts on the white clothing to take out, and this is what we're discussing now, to take out the spoon and the pail, the spoon and the machta, like the shovel that was left in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Number 5 would be when he changes again into the gold clothing in order to do the last, the Korban Tamid, the regular service of the afternoon. And therefore, we see where the order of the verse has to be in order for there to be 5 times that the Kohen has to go to the mikvah. If not, and if the order is the way the verses are, he would only have to go 3 times into the mikvah. That's what this picture is showing us. The Gemara on 71 continues and tells us that, remember, we sent out the goat that went la'azazel, remember, to the wilderness. We discussed that person last week. And again, the Gemara tells us that when he comes back, he tells the high priest, we did everything that you sent us to do. That's if he meets him in the marketplace. If he sees him in his house, so then he says, I did what God sent me to do. What's very interesting is the Gemara discusses the difference. Why does the person say something different depending on where he meets the high priest? And the Gemara says that in public, So then we want to give the high priest his honor. We want to honor him. And therefore, the person says, I listened to everything you said. But really, we know that he was listening to what God told him to do. And therefore, in public, he says that he was listening to the high priest. In private, he says he was really listening to God. So I thought that that was very interesting. The Gemara continues and tells us about how different people left or said goodbye to one another. And using God's name or saying goodbye in a proper way. And the Gemara then continues on 71, telling us about a that they would make a festival, a Yom Tov, after Yom Kippur in order to rejoice. As we've mentioned throughout this Masechet, there was a lot of tension on Yom Kippur, and it's interesting because it's not the way we think about it. I know I'm always. I don't know if tension is the right word, but it's a very serious day, Yom Kippur. We're fasting. We're in shul for most of the day. There are a lot of prayers. We want to take it very seriously. What's interesting is in the time of the temple, in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, the tension was, I think, a little different, right? We discussed that if the high priest, if the Kohen Gadol was not fit to be the Kohen Gadol or fit to do the service, that he could die. And I think the tension was different. It was that we hoped that the service would go according to plan. Remember, the beginning of the Masechet, we talked about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, preparing himself the whole week before and the night before. He doesn't sleep. There's a lot of anticipation, and it's really centered around the avodah, the service of the temple, which is just interesting to think about our Yom Kippur versus the Yom Kippur in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Once everybody, so that basically they would give a lot of honor to the Kohen Gadol. The Gemara discusses that they would also give honor to a Talmid Chacham, to a scholar, over or more so than a high priest who is here it's called an Am Haaretz. Maybe I would use the word ignorant. So it's interesting to see the comparison between the Torah scholar and the Kohen Gadol. The Gemara says again, so now the Mishnah on 71 discusses the clothing that the priests wore. And here again is here's some pictures. So the one on the left, the Kohen on the left, again wearing the white clothing, that is the regular Kohen, the regular priest. He wore 4 special garments. You can see here he had pants, a tunic, a belt, and a hat. The Kohen Gadol, the Gemara explains here, the Mishnah explains here, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore 8 garments. So the 4 of the regular Kohen plus 4 special garments, and that was the Me'il, which was here it says a long shirt, but a tunic that went on top. The choshen and the ephod are the breastplate, and the tzitz, which is the headband. So the golden headband that had God's name on it. So these are the special garments, and the Mishnah explains that the breastplate, the choshen, was a way to communicate with God, which was very interesting. The Gemara will explain more, but the Mishnah says that a king or the leader of the court or a public leader could ask God a question through the high priest, through the choshen, through the urim v'tumim, which was the special breastplate that the Kohen wore. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next daf. But first, the Gemara is going to tell us how these garments were made. So um, the Gemara says that in the Torah, the verse says that it needs to be shesh mashzar, shesh as in six, that each thread had six strands, and meaning each thread was I guess right was six strands, and that was what was used to make the tunic and the hat. Um, Mashzar, anything that says that was made shesh mashzar, meant that it was eight strands. The me'il, the long shirt of the Kohen Gadol, that had 12 strands. And the Gemara is going to continue and tell us many more things that were made and how many strands they were used. But first, it explains what does it mean, shesh? Again, shesh in terms of six, but shesh really means linen. It was the fabric in which, or the material in which the item of was made. So again, shesh is linen. And again, linen is made out of flax, which grows in single stalks. And basically, the Gemara explains that anything that was shesh was six six strands per thread. Okay, now comes some math. Again, mashzar is eight. So that was for the me'il. This was for the rimonim, the pomegranates that were woven, that were placed on the special coat of the high priest. So that was eight. The parochet was made out of 24 strands. So it basically, the Gemara explains that it was six types of wool. Each thread had eight. Or maybe it was learned from the belt. So again, here you can see the me'il on the right. It's talking about the me'il, which was again the long tunic that was 12 strands. So it was basically braided, right? 6 times 2, which is 12. Then the parochet, that's the one in the middle, the parochet was 24 strands because it was six, right? Each thread is 6 strands times 4 because it was 4 different types of threads. Again, you can see here tchelet, argaman, tolat shani, and shesh mashzar, which is different colors, right? Tchelet is the blue, argaman is purple, tolat shani is red, shesh mashzar is the white linen. So that is the parochet, and that was 24. And the choshen and the ephod were 28 because they have the same as it was the same as the parochet, but we also have zahav, gold. So gold was another 4 strands, and that was added to again, there wasn't gold in the me'il or the parochet, only in the choshen. The Gemara continues telling us about the priestly garments and that you needed to treat them with great respect. If you tore them, you would get lashes. If you detach the choshen from the ephod, again, the choshen is the breastplate with all the stones on them. And the ephod was the material that it was sewn to, and then it was attached to the high priest. So you were not allowed to remove the breastplate from the material, from the fabric that it sat on. The Gemara explains as well, you're not allowed to remove the poles from the aron, from the ark, which is going to take us into a conversation about the ark. But the ark is in that held the tablets. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So the Gemara talks about again these poles and says that they needed to be able to be placed into the rings, but they were not; those poles were not to be removed. From here, the Gemara continues on 72, discussing the clothing of the high priest, and to say that if that the clothing, we say the clothing makes the man, but the high priest could not do the service unless he had these clothing, unless he was wearing the clothing, and that is what facilitates atonement for the nation. And that was something that was very important. Another point that the Gemara adds is that maybe these clothing, they were woven in one piece, meaning it was like ready to wear. It wasn't like woven in 10 different parts and sewn together, but it was mostly woven in one piece, and the sleeves were sewn on. From here, the Gemara discusses the Aron Habrit, where the tablets were kept. And here you can see it was made in different parts. Here are the poles that we were discussing before. And the Gemara explains that Bezalel was the architect of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, and he made the Aron. He made it in 3 boxes, as you can see here. There's an inner box made out of gold, and a middle box that was made out of wood, and then an outer box made out of gold. That's how the Aron was covered on the inside and outside with gold. The Gemara has a beautiful line that there were 3 crowns that existed in the temple. One, as we can see here, what does it mean, crown? If you can look carefully, I'll make it a little bit bigger. No. If you can look carefully, there was this lattice work that went around the top edge of the Aron. That is considered a crown. The Gemara says that there are 3 crowns in the temple, one on the Aron, one on the golden altar, which we saw last week, and one on the shulchan, on the table of the showbread. And these symbolize 3 different crowns that God gave the Jewish people. The crown of priesthood, and that was given to Aaron, that was given to Aaron. The shulchan, the crown that was on the table, symbolizes malchut, meaning monarchy, and that was given to David. And the last crown is the crown on the Aron. And again, what's inside the Aron? The luchot, the tablets, and that symbolizes the crown of Torah. And the Gemara teaches us that this crown is available to everyone. And it's really a beautiful idea that anyone who learns Torah, so all 9 of you that are here in this shir, plus, everyone else out there, if you learn Torah, you have acquired the crown of Torah. And it's really just a beautiful idea. The Gemara continues the comparison between a person who learns Torah and the Aron, right? Saying that just like the Aron here, you can see its inside matches its outside, right? It's gold on the inside and gold on the outside. A person who studies Torah, or a proper, here it seems, right, a scholar should, again, his inside should be reflected on the outside. And I'll say it the other way also, right? His outside should reflect his inside. We should all reflect in both ways, right? On the inside, on the outside, all the Torah that we are acquiring. And from here, the Gemara continues about a scholar, that a scholar should be a yirat shamayim, should have awe of heaven, and be a God-fearing Jew. The Gemara again talks at the bottom of 72 about the parochet, about the curtain that was at the entranceway, and how that curtain, we did learn it previously. The curtain was woven and embroidered, and it had a design on it. And we've learned it before that either the design was the same on both sides or different pictures on both sides, but somehow it was miraculously or very ingeniously created. On Daf 73, we continue talking about the clothing of the high priest. And the concept of what's called the Kohen Mashuach Milchama. This is the priest who was anointed to go out to war with the nation. This was a special priest who, it wasn't the high priest from the temple, it was another priest who went out to war with the army, I guess to give spiritual support, maybe like a chaplain, and he also wore special clothing. The Gemara discusses, does he wears more than the regular Kohen of 4, but maybe less than the Kohen Gadol of 8. The Gemara tries to figure out what his status is. It's somewhere between, the regular Kohen and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And the Gemara brings up 5 things that are the same and then different between these two priests. The Gemara continues and talks about the breastplate, as I mentioned before, the Urim v'Tumim. How did it work? How were you able to ask God a question? So the Gemara describes that the questioner would face the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and then the Kohen Gadol would face the temple, and then the leader or whoever was asking the question would ask, right, should I go out to war? And the answer would be, again, in God's name. And you shouldn't, interestingly, the Gemara says that you don't ask out loud, you ask quietly, like Chana. And it brings us back to Chana, who prayed, who davened in the Mishkan in Shiloh. Right, Chana is where we learn how to pray the silent Amidah. Right, because she prayed silently, but her lips were moving, right? And from here we learned that when in prayer, we shouldn't yell out loud in the silent Amidah. It's something that's private between me and God. But we also shouldn't just read the words with our eyes. We should actually say the words. So the same thing here when asking the Urim v'Tumim, the same idea. Also, you shouldn't ask for 2 things together. You should ask one and then the other, and that the answer never changes, meaning the answer is the answer. And how does the answer come back? So the Gemara explains that letters would light up on the Urim v'Tumim. What does that mean? The Urim v'Tumim, the breastplate, had 12 stones. On each stone, there was written the name of each tribe. So Reuven, right? It had the word Reuven engraved on his stone. Right? Shimon, Levi. Each stone had its tribe's name. So a letter would light up, and that would spell out the answer to the question. But says the Gemara, hold on, and those of you can look at it later. It doesn't have, if you look at all 12 tribes, we don't have every letter in the Hebrew alphabet. So the Gemara explains that it also said the words Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That gave us the tzaddik, because interestingly enough, there's no tzaddik in the 12 tribes. And it also said Shivtei Yushurun. These are the tribes of Israel. Shivtei gave us the tet, because the tet was also missing. And with that, we finish the 7th chapter, and we are now going to begin the 8th chapter. Now, the 8th chapter is going to talk about, and I would say this is going to be the most practical chapter of Masechet Yoma, because we're going to talk about the things that apply to us nowadays, the 6 prohibitions that are prohibited on Yom Kippur. And these are, right, eating, drinking, anointing oneself, which means, right, putting on oils, wearing leather shoes, bathing, and having marital relations. These are all prohibited. They were from the time of the Chumash to nowadays. The Mishnah adds that a king and a bride can wash their face, and we'll get back to that in a little bit, and that a nursing mother can wear shoes. But there is a difference of opinion. We'll get to her at the end. And then the Mishnah ends by telling us the amount, the shiur, for each thing. So for eating, it's called a kotevet. A kotevet is a plump date. That is the size that if you ate that much, you would be considered liable for eating on Yom Kippur. For drinking, it's called melo lugmav, which basically means a full cheek. And these are the amounts. This is just as an aside. Practically, this is very important for those of you who are familiar. If somebody is, let's say, sick, if someone is what's called chole sheyesh bo sakana. If there's true danger, you are allowed to break your fast. The rabbis talk about someone who is what's called chole she'en bo sakana. You're sick, you're not feeling well. There is no, let's say, danger to your life. Then you are, again, please ask your local rabbi and local authority, but there are ways to eat very small amounts in order to give you energy so you don't, so you don't pass out. And these amounts, these shiurim, are very important because they tell us what is considered eating and drinking. So again, we'll get to that at the end of today's class. So the Gemara continues. What about what's called chatzi shiur, meaning half a shiur? Again, it's not that it's okay, right? If I have just a tiny bit, that's not okay. But in extenuating circumstances, there are leniencies, and that's just important to understand. Okay, let's move on to Daf 74, Ayin Dalid. Again, here the Gemara says that the punishment of karet, of being cut off, is only if you ate or drank this amount or more. If it's less, so then the punishment is different. Okay, let's talk about these afflictions, right? The Bible says that you have to afflict your soul, right? Ta'anu et nafshotechem. Inui means affliction, and that's basically what we're going to talk about here. The question is, how far do we take it? Do you need really to afflict yourself more than these 6 things? And the Gemara says no, meaning the Torah told us these 6 things are the things that we need to refrain from, but other things are okay. And therefore, that's just important to understand that, the afflictions that we're talking about are these objective prohibitions, and they're the same for everyone. So again, right, eating and drinking, From here, the Gemara talks about the Jewish people who were afflicted in the desert. This helps in our Parshat Shavua. We've been learning about Sefer Bamidbar, how the Jews in the desert are constantly complaining that they are suffering. So the Gemara here brings those concepts of suffering. Well, how were they suffering in the desert? Let's understand what is suffering. So the Gemara says they were suffering because they didn't have food, right? So not eating is suffering. Right? The Gemara adds that they were eating man. What about the man? That seemed to also have been an affliction to them. They suffered because of the man, right? So when we think about the man that fell from the sky, this heavenly sustenance that sustained the Jewish people for 40 years in the desert, we think, wow, that's amazing, right? They didn't have to cook, they didn't have to shop, they didn't have to make menus, like the food just was there every day. Interestingly enough, the Gemara describes that it's not so simple, right? They didn't know. I guess they were supposed to have faith, but every day they needed to collect anew, right? So when they went to bed at night, they didn't know if the man was going to be there in the morning. And the other thing the Gemara adds is that though the Gemara will tell us, and we're going to talk a lot about the man in a minute, that the man could taste like anything, but it didn't look like that, right? If you think about cake and it tastes like cake, that's wonderful, but you're still not chewing cake. And there's something very, I guess, psychologically pleasing to see cake. So they didn't see that, right? Imagine if you could take a pill every day and it tasted like whatever you wanted. That's lovely, but food is nice. So it's interesting that the Gemara mentions that right, the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi, who actually was blind, adds that, right, when someone is blind and you can't see your food, you don't get as much enjoyment out of it. So there's something pleasing about seeing, right, visually your food, and if not, there is some sort of suffering. Daf 75, Ayin Hey, talks about the curse of the snake. Since we're talking about food, right? The snake in Breshit, in Genesis, the snake is cursed that he's going to, right, eat from the dust. So what does that mean, right? That his food is going to taste like dust. I can imagine that would be a terrible thing. Again, but one could say, on the other hand, his food is always there, right? If it's, but in the dust, it's always there. And from here, interestingly, the Gemara says that there are curses that if you look carefully, you could see, I guess, what we would call the silver lining. So it's interesting to think about that when things are bad, just recognize that there's also a silver lining. And the Gemara goes through on Daf 75 some of these curses where God curses someone, and it is a terrible thing, but there's something positive to it as well. So you can look there for the different things. Okay, and from here we're going to talk about the man. As I mentioned, the Gemara likes to, when bringing up a topic, let's go on a little bit of a tangent, and let's learn about the man. What was it like? So the Gemara says that it was round and white, sorry, one second. That the man had a special power, that it could tell if a baby, the Gemara describes a case where a woman is either divorced or widowed from her husband, and then she marries a new husband within 3 months, and then she discovers that she's pregnant. And the question is the baby from the first husband or the second husband? The Gemara says that the man was able to tell us who was the father, which was interesting. It could also atone for their sins. It could reveal things in judgment. So again, interesting here, the Gemara is giving the man a very magical almost power to it. The Gemara talks about how it fell and how, right, for the righteous people, it fell right in front of their door. So that all they had to do was open their door and there it would be, kind of like Amazon Prime to your door. If you were Benoni, you were in the middle, so then you had to walk a little further outside. And if you were really bad, you had to walk really far and go and look at it. The Gemara discusses how the dew would fall, right? There would be dew underneath it and then dew that covers it. This is where we get the idea that on Shabbat we cover our challah. This comes from here, from the fact that the man was covered by dew on the bottom. That's like the table or the challah board, and on top with the challah cover, right? So that's what we do to commemorate this. Interesting that along with the man, fragrances also fell from the sky. There were fragrances for women and spices that they could add to their food. And these also precious stones. I guess this is a way for the Gemara to explain how in the desert the Jewish people had all of these things, right? Where did they get fragrances? Where did they get spices? If you go into the wilderness, we really don't see much of this. So the Gemara here is saying it fell from the heavens as well. And this is what was donated by the Jewish people when they were building the Mishkan, the tabernacle. The Gemara continues and says that it tasted like oil, or it could taste like anything, or it could change forms like a demon. It's here again now, the Gemara goes to a different angle, which was that the Jewish people were not happy with the man and still complained. And that's when God sent the slav, the quail, that was sent in large quantities, and how the people were punished. There was a plague. Many people died and they suffered. Then here the Gemara continues talking about the slav and how it was really like these inferior birds that did not taste very good. But again, the man would melt in your mouth, or it would be absorbed in your body, and that it didn't cause them to go to the bathroom, which was interesting because then the Gemara asks, well, the Torah tells us that the people didn't need to go to the bathroom. There's a verse that says that if you needed to relieve yourself, you needed to take a shovel with you and leave the camp, go to the back of the camp, and make sure that you covered whatever you or buried whatever you left behind. So that is discussed at the bottom of 75. Okay, 76. The Gemara asks, well, if God was sending man every day, why didn't he just send it down once a year and let them, gather it all up, and that would be enough? Like, why do you need every day? And the Gemara explains, I think, really beautifully that God wanted the people to daven for it every day. God wanted daily contact with his people, and therefore it was sent every day. Another opinion was God wanted it to be fresh, so it came down fresh every day, and therefore. And that was very important. The Gemara describes that it fell very deep. There was a lot of it, and it was seen by all the enemies of the people, and that everybody could see it. So just I would say the greatness or the grandness of the miracle of the man. Okay, let's go back to drinking and eating. So on Daf 76, the Gemara tells us that drinking wine is like eating. And here we get into a whole discussion about the word tirosh. Tirosh in general is described or translated as wine. Here, there's actually a company that makes grape juice, and it's called tirosh. Some people in Hebrew call grape juice tirosh, but there's a discussion here on whether tirosh meant the wine or the fruit that made the wine, right? Is the tirosh eating or drinking? And that's the discussion here. And from here, the Gemara says that drinking wine can either be right good or bad, right? Ti rosh, it could make you like a rosh, like at the head, or it could make you rash, very poor, right? So you have to be very careful with your alcohol consumption. Um, okay, from here we get into quite a long story about Daniel. Daniel was a prophet who took upon himself afflictions for 3 weeks, and he didn't eat refined bread, and he didn't anoint himself, and we see here that there's washing and anointing are considered afflictions. Again, we're looking for different sources that I don't want to use the word prove, but where we see the 6 prohibitions called inuyim, afflictions. So here from Daniel, we see that washing and anointing are considered afflictions. Here the question is again, is the water on the outside, meaning anointing and washing, or could it be from the inside, so it's drinking, right? So again, like, is anointing like drinking? Like, what is water on the inside the same as water on the outside? But the Gemara is going to diverge for a minute and tell us an interesting story about Yechezkel, who saw a vision of 70 elders who stood in front of idols in the temple, and there was incense there, and an angel brings him to heaven and then to Yerushalayim, to the inner courtyard of God, and there are these men there. We're now on the top of 77, whose backs are to the temple, and they bow to the sun, and they basically disgrace the temple. And Hashem says that he will destroy the good with the bad. And Hashem tells Gabriel, the angel, to destroy Jerusalem with his fire. If you remember, we have mentioned Gabriel before. He's the angel of fire. And it says here that Gabriel does fulfill his mission, but he takes the fire from a kruv, from a cherub. And he returns with a message that he did everything right. And because of this, because he didn't really do everything exactly right, he's sent out of the pargod, which is like the inner sanctum of God. And the Gemara explains that he should have taken the fire by himself. And then they put a Persian ministering angel in his place. And he wanted to take things from the Jews. Anyway, it's a lot of drama. But basically, Gabriel argues that the Jews who learn Torah shouldn't be ruled by a non-Jew. And Gabriel spoke very positively about Daniel, and then he was let back in, right? We brought this up because Daniel describes that he sees Gabriel, the angel, being brought back. So this is like the backstory of why Gabriel was sent away and why he was brought back. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. Back to the Jews in the desert, how the Jews in the desert were very weary. Again, maybe because they didn't wash. Again, trying to understand the idea of washing as as an affliction. The Gemara says also not wearing shoes is an affliction. As David Hamelech, right, King David walked barefoot and he was afflicted. So we see here that not wearing shoes is an affliction. Okay, refraining from relations is also an affliction that's learned from Lavan, also from Shem, who takes Dinah, the same idea. Relations are considered an affliction. And now, okay, let's talk a little bit about washing. So the Gemara says you can't even wash part of your body. So too, you may not anoint part of your body. But if you're very, very dirty, you can. And if you're very sick, you can anoint as well. A mother can wash her hand to feed her child. And the Gemara says that you can walk through water in order to learn with a rabbi. Let's say you live, again, in those days, there aren't many bridges. So let's say you have to walk through a stream to get to a class. You're allowed to walk through the stream in order to go to the class. And here, the Gemara at the bottom of 77, at the top of 78, describes the water that came out of the Beit HaMikdash, that will come out of the Beit HaMikdash. We have seen this previously, so if it sounds familiar, it's because we've learned it before. But there's a prophecy. Yechezkel saw the prophecy that a stream, that water will flow from the Beit HaMikdash, from the third temple, out of Yerushalayim. And the Gemara describes how in the beginning it's very slow, it's very small, almost like the antenna of an insect, and then it gets a little wider and a little wider and a little wider, till it really is a stream, and then it's a flowing river. And it says that you can walk through this, you can cross it, and that would be okay. But again, if it's if it's flowing very strongly, then that's already too much. Okay. The Gemara on 78 again asks, well, maybe you can walk through water on Yom Kippur. We know, again, you're not allowed to wash yourself, but as a way to, let's say, get shul, so that would be okay. But maybe that's because you're not wearing shoes. But what about on Shabbat? When you're wearing shoes, are you allowed to walk through water? What's the question? The question is, if we're concerned lest you will lose a shoe, right? Maybe it'll fall off, and then you will pick it up and carry it for amot, as we know you're not allowed to do on Shabbat. So the Gemara asks, are you allowed to walk through water with shoes? So one opinion is no. One opinion is yes, you can walk. Another is, what about sandals? Here, it doesn't necessarily mean sandals. It could also mean loosely fitting shoes. Again, just a point. When we see the word shoe or even sandal in the Gemara, it means a leather shoe. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But shoes in general were made out of leather. Time of the Mishnah, in the time of the Gemara, that was the way you made a shoe. We'll get to other materials in a minute, but those are not considered shoes. So that's just important to recognize here, which is why, right, nowadays on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to wear leather shoes, but you can wear, your flip-flops or your Crocs, right? If it's made out of plastic, it's not considered a proper shoe, and therefore it is not prohibited. Okay, so the Gemara describes a few stories of people walking through water on Shabbat, and that it would be okay. The Gemara then continues and says you're not allowed to sit on mud on Yom Kippur, not for the reason you think, not because it's going to make you dirty, but it's actually going to cool you off. And that would be problematic. That would be like washing, right? So if any of you have been to, let's say, the Dead Sea, where people put on the mud, so it's a way of maybe cleansing yourself. So that would be prohibited. Okay, let's continue. So here on 78, the Gemara asks, the rabbi asks, what about wearing shoes made out of reeds, out of grass, out of palm trees, palm leaves? Is that okay? And the Gemara says yes, even though it functions as a shoe, it's not considered a proper shoe, and therefore it is not prohibited, and one could wear it. The Gemara continues and discusses a child, and that a child on Yom Kippur could really do anything. They can eat, they can drink, but they shouldn't wear leather shoes. The Gemara asks why, and basically because. Again, the adult is the one who puts on the shoe, and therefore we want the adult to teach the child that they should not be wearing leather shoes on Yom Kippur. Um, Interesting. There's just a side point which I thought was interesting. I mean, it's all interesting, but it says Abaye's mother, but it really means Abaye's nursemaid. Abaye's mother unfortunately dies in childbirth, and a nursemaid raises Abaye. He was very close to her, so he calls her mother. And throughout the Gemara, you see Abaye bringing up advice that his nursemaid gave him. So here's one of those instances where the nursemaid taught him about raising children, the importance of feeding them, of washing them. And one last thing he says is the importance that when they get a little bit older, to let them break some dishes. That breaking dishes gets out, I guess, aggression, and therefore let them do it. And the Gemara even says there was a rabbi who would buy his children like broken dishes, so that which were not usable anymore, so that they could break the dishes and I guess feel better. Interestingly enough, nowadays there's a new craze that are called smash rooms, where you can actually pay to go to a place to break dishes and electronics, and I wonder if they read the Gemara and that's where they got it from. So it's just interesting. Okay, the king and the queen, not the queen, the king and the bride are allowed to wash on Yom Kippur. They're allowed to wash, their faces on Yom Kippur. It's not like they can take a shower. But they can wash their faces. Why? The Gemara says on the bottom of 78, the king must always look presentable. Again, the king being a representative of God to the people. So he always needs to look presentable. The kala needs to look good for her husband. The Gemara explains that this is within the first 30 days of her marriage. Afterwards, a woman should always look good for her husband, but here we want to make sure that one day without makeup is okay if you've been married for 10 years, but when you're a new bride, we say, you should do whatever you need to do for 30 days. Okay, a woman who just gave birth can wear shoes, again, in order to make her feel better, so she shouldn't get sick. If you're afraid that you're going to get bitten by a scorpion, you can also wear shoes. So that is about shoes. Now we're going to the last daf, today's daf 79, which is all about shiurim. Shiurim are the measurements or the amounts in order to make one liable for eating or for different things. As we mentioned, the amount of eating to be liable on Yom Kippur is the kotevet, which is a large date. The Gemara is going to ask, right, with a pit, without a pit. Here it is with a pit. For a bone if you see a bone or touch a bone to become impure, it needs to be the size of a wheat kernel, and that is again if it's dry and with its shell. And then there's a discussion about this size of a date, a large date. Is it considered larger than an egg or smaller? I don't know if you remember, but a long time ago, I showed you this chart about different measurements for different things. Some people are familiar with the term kazait. You have to eat a kazait. Kazait is an olive volume. So that's one measurement. Another is what's called a kibetza, like an egg. And this one is like a date, again, a kotevet. So our question is going to be, I know olive and I know egg. Where does date fit in? Is date between olive and egg? Is it less than an egg, or is it more than an egg? And of course, we are going to have two different opinions. The first opinion is that it is larger than an egg, and of course, the second opinion is that it is smaller than an egg. So that is those are the two different opinions. Interestingly, the Gemara is going to learn it from the laws of Sukkah, which is of course our next Masechet. So it's a little bit of a preview for our next Masechet, which is we know that you're supposed to eat in the Sukkah. How much food makes you obligated to eat in the Sukkah? And the Gemara says that it's again, is it a kotevet? Is it a beitzah? And here the Gemara goes through that discussion about sukkah. Interestingly enough, if it's just a snack, you might not necessarily have to eat it in the sukkah. And from here we get the idea, and we will learn it again in the next Masechet, that if you eat fruits and vegetables, which definitely in the time of the Gemara is seen as a snack and not a meal, you do not need to eat them in the sukkah. You can and you should, but if you don't have a sukkah near you, it's okay if you're eating fruits and vegetables, as opposed to eating bread. That always needs to be done in the sukkah. And the last thing that's mentioned on Daf 79 is the volume for chametz on Pesach. So it's nice we got Sukkot and now we get Pesach. What is the volume to make one liable for eating leavening, right? Something that is chametz on Pesach. And here the Gemara explains that there are two different volumes given. For seor, seor is actual leavening. So anybody who makes like sourdough, so it's like the starter, that is real chametz. So the size is a zait, an olive amount. But for other things, right, so anything else that is also leavened, meaning bread, pretzels, cake, that's a kotevet. And here, again, the date. So here, the Gemara is going to learn why didn't it say a beitzah? It must be that this date is less than an egg, right? And therefore, it's being more strict. So again, that's the end of 79, discussing again different volumes for different foods that we eat, but the volume for Yom Kippur, again, in general, the volume for eating is going to be a kezait, an olive, but for Yom Kippur, the prohibition of eating is going to be a kotevet, right? Again, that date. Again, because, and I think this is just important to summarize, when we talk about these prohibitions on Yom Kippur, we said that the verse says it has to be an inui nefesh, right? It has to afflict us. There has to be I guess the word is suffering, and that is going to be that's going to be the way we're going to define the different prohibitions that we have. So with that, we finish this week's. I'm going to try for next week to maybe finish up the Masechet. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Masechet is finished on Thursday. So maybe I'll try to summarize quickly because we meet on Tuesday. So maybe I'll summarize through Thursday and we'll finish up together next Tuesday night. So we're back to our regular schedule time. And then the week after that, we will start our new Masechet of Sukkah and learn all about Sukkot. Those of you who are debating if they should learn Masechet Sukkah, just recognize that we will finish Masechet Sukkah before Sukkot, and therefore you will know all the ins and outs of that holiday and really all the different practices during the time of the temple and nowadays. So that's just a push for the next Masechet. Another thing I would just like to add is that by tomorrow's daf, which means daf 80, those of you who started learning from Masechet Brachot, you will have completed 20% of the Talmud. So tomorrow will be 20% of the Talmud. So really, kol hakavod to everyone who has been learning, and thank you for joining me. I see many faces who have been here from the beginning, so it's really been my honor, and looking forward to continuing our learning together. So Shavua Tov, everyone, and see you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.